There's something sacred about a parent's love for their child. Something fierce, unwavering, protective. For me, that truth was never just a saying. It was my entire existence from the moment my daughter, Emily, came into this world fighting for every breath. Born prematurely with cerebral palsy, Emily had never taken a single step unaided. Her wheelchair wasn't just mobility aid. It was her legs, her independence, her pride. It had taken months of insurance battles, tears, and savings to finally get the customized titanium-framed chair that suited her little body. So when some entitled woman rolled away like it was a shopping cart left in the wrong spot, my world didn't just tilt. It shattered. But I'm getting ahead of myself. My name is Derek, and until all this unfolded, I lived a quiet, purposeful life with my wife, Marcy, and our daughter, Emily, in a quiet HOA-controlled neighborhood in the suburbs just outside of Denver. I was a mechanical engineer by trade, working remotely since the pandemic, and Marcy taught second grade at the local elementary school. We moved into this neighborhood, thinking it was a safe, welcoming place. Lots of parks, smooth sidewalks, polite neighbors, and a well-maintained community center where Emily loved to attend adaptive art classes every other Saturday. When you have a disabled child, every bit of infrastructure matters. The slope of a ramp, the texture of a sidewalk, the width of a doorway. They're not minor details. They're the difference between participation and exclusion. So we were meticulous when house hunting, ensuring every inch of our new home and neighborhood supported Emily's freedom. And for the first year or so, things were wonderful. Emily made friends. Our neighbors were friendly. There was even a small group of residents who volunteered to help maintain accessible features around the neighborhood, ramps, gardens, things like that. But there was one person who always seemed to hover just outside the bubble of community spirit. One person who never smiled, never waved, and always looked like something had just been done to her. Her name was Nancy. But around here, folks whispered her other name, Karen. She wasn't old enough to be a retiree, but she walked like one of those women who had already decided they were owed something by the world. Expensive yoga pants, sunglasses too big for her face, and that unmistakable air of superiority that followed her like a bad smell. Karen didn't just participate in the HOA. She was the HOA, at least in spirit. Technically, she was just the Assistant Secretary of Community Conduct, which is HOA speak for Tattletale-in-Chief. She didn't enforce laws. She enforced feelings. Her feelings, about whose grass was half an inch too high, about which trash bins were visible from the street, and most disturbingly, about who belonged in her neighborhood. The first time Karen noticed Emily was on a breezy spring afternoon. Emily had just finished her art class, and I was helping her get into our SUV. Her wheelchair was parked on the grass beside the passenger door while I helped buckle her in. That's when I heard the unmistakable sound of judgment, a throat clearing, sharp and deliberate. "Is that yours?" she asked, pointing at Emily's chair like it was a broken appliance. I turned, eyebrows raised. "Excuse me? That chair, it's blocking community landscaping space," she said, gesturing toward the grass. "We have regulations about damage to communal property." I blinked. She's 7, and it's her wheelchair. She uses it to move. Karen didn't flinch. "I'm just saying, I've seen too many residents abuse the leniency around ADA regulations. Just because someone's got wheels doesn't mean they can park anywhere they please." I stared at her in disbelief, adrenaline simmering beneath my skin. "Have a good day," I muttered, biting back every word I wanted to say. That was the first time. The second time happened during a Saturday HOA gathering at the park. 3 weeks later, we just returned from a vendor booth where Emily had excitedly picked out a blue helium balloon. I was pushing her in the chair, and we were heading back to a picnic table when I noticed Karen staring. Again, her arms were crossed, lips pursed, and sunglasses pushed down just enough to show her disapproving eyes. "What now?" I asked under my breath. Marcy noticed too. Ignore her, but Karen didn't let us. As we passed, she stepped directly into our path. "Where's your permit?" she asked sharply. I looked around. Permit for what? For that equipment. If you're using the community event grounds with a personal mobility device that takes up more than standard footprint space, we require an advance notice for safety reasons. Marcy scoffed. You mean her wheelchair? Karen didn't blink. I've seen it almost trip someone last time. The back handles stick out awkwardly. It's a hazard. Emily's little voice piped up. It's not a hazard. It's my chair. Karen leaned down, smiling with the kind of fake sweetness that curdles milk. I know, sweetheart, but rules are rules. That time, I didn't hold back. I told her to take her passive-aggressive micromanagement and file it with someone who gave a damn. That earned me a formal HOA warning letter the following Monday for verbal hostility in a shared public space. Things simmered for a while after that, but it was like living near a gas leak. You didn't smell it all the time, but you knew it was there, and eventually something was going to spark. That spark came one rainy Wednesday in early May. It started like any other school morning. Marcy had already left for work, and I was helping Emily into her raincoat while she sat in her wheelchair at the base of our wheelchair ramp by the front door. Her school van pulled up on time, and I carried her backpack out first while she waited. Normally, I bring her chair down the ramp last, right after checking her bags, meds, and notes. But that day, I stepped out with her backpack, came back inside for her, and when we exited the front door, the wheelchair was gone. Not tipped over, not moved to the side. Gone. The only sound was the pattering rain, and Emily's breath hitching as she looked at the empty space in front of her. Dad, where's my chair? I blinked. What the... I ran down the ramp, scanning the front lawn, the street, even our neighbor's yard. It was nowhere. The van driver saw my panic and stepped out, concerned. Everything all right? No, I said. Her chair's missing. Someone took it. At first, I assumed it had to be a prank or a delivery mistake. Maybe someone thought it was junked? But no, this was a top-line, custom chair. It wasn't something you'd mistake for trash. Then I saw her, Karen, 2 doors down, standing in her open garage, sipping a coffee like nothing was wrong. But beside her, leaned against the inside wall of her garage like a bicycle on loan, was Emily's chair. I froze. At first, I couldn't even process it. It felt surreal, like my brain refused to believe what I was seeing. But there it was, our daughter's only way of moving freely. Leaned carelessly against the inside garage belonging to the last person on earth I'd have trusted with it. I marched over. Karen, I said, barely keeping my voice steady. Why the hell do you have my daughter's wheelchair in your garage? She didn't even look surprised. She sipped her coffee and gestured vaguely with her free hand. It was left out, blocking the sidewalk. I moved it before someone tripped. You stole a disabled child's wheelchair. I removed an obstruction, she said coldly, and I was planning on contacting the HOA to report the repeated negligence of mobility equipment being abandoned in shared spaces. I stared at her, eyes wide. Are you insane? Karen tilted her head. Watch your tone. I don't respond well to threats. I took out my phone, took a photo of the chair, of her standing next to it, and called the police right there on her lawn. She scoffed. Oh, please. This is a civil matter, not a criminal one. The HOA will sort out. She had no idea how wrong she was. The police arrived within 12 minutes. I remember that because I checked my phone twice during that painful wait. Once when I called, and once again when Emily began to cry in the school van, too afraid to get out without her chair. The driver, God bless him, stayed calm and even offered to come back later. But Emily wasn't hearing any of it. She just kept repeating, "Why did she take it, Daddy? Why did she take it?" Those words sliced through me. I didn't have an answer. The officer who responded was a younger guy, Officer Langley, maybe mid-30s, calm, clean-cut, professional. He took one look at the situation. Me standing in the rain, Emily sitting in the back of a school van, and a very expensive, custom-built wheelchair sitting inside Karen's open garage, and his eyes narrowed. "Ma'am," he said calmly to Karen, "do you want to explain why you have this child's wheelchair inside your property?" Karen didn't flinch. It was blocking the public sidewalk. That's a violation of Section 4.3 in our HOA's Community Appearance Code. I moved it for safety reasons. Langley blinked, clearly stunned. "Did you contact the family before removing it?" "I shouldn't have to," she said matter-of-factly. It was unattended, obstructing pedestrian flow. I acted in the best interest of the neighborhood. Langley looked over at me. "Sir, this is your daughter's?" I nodded. "She's 7 years old. She was inside our front door for maybe 60 seconds while I got her bag. That's all it took. And this is custom built." "Yes, over $6,000 with insurance. She can't use a generic hospital chair. It's measured to her spine and hip support." Karen interjected. "He's exaggerating. It's a chair. You can buy them at any medical store." The officer held up a hand. "Ma'am, that's enough. Right now, this looks like theft of medical equipment. I'm going to have to take a statement." Karen's smile faltered just a bit. "You can't be serious," she snapped. "It's a misunderstanding. I was helping." Langley turned back to me. "You want to press charges?" I looked over at Emily, still in the van, now staring at us through the fog window with tears streaking her cheeks, and I didn't even hesitate. "Yes, I absolutely do." Karen's mouth opened like she was about to unleash a full legal lecture, but Officer Langley cut her off before she could begin. "You can explain yourself to a judge," he said. "For now, I'll need to log this as a petty theft of medical equipment and open a report." "Petty theft?" Karen said in disbelief. "This is outrageous. I'll have the HOA's legal team all over this. You think I'm just some busybody? I'm a board member." Langley didn't even blink. "And I'm an officer of the law, not the HOA. You can go inside now. We'll return the property to the family." With Karen fuming, the officer helped me return the chair to the school van. I buckled Emily in again. She didn't say a word, just clutched the armrest with her little hands like she was afraid it might disappear again. The van pulled away, and I stood in the driveway for a moment, dripping wet, watching Karen stomp back into her house like a snake that had just been booted off a porch. But I should have known this wasn't over. The following day, I received an envelope from the HOA slipped neatly into our mailbox. No stamp, just hand-delivered, probably by Karen herself. Inside was a typed letter on official HOA letterhead that read more like a threat than a memo. Violation of common area accessibility standards. On date. It was observed that medical equipment belonging to your household was left unattended in a shared pedestrian area, obstructing sidewalk access and posing a potential tripping hazard. While the equipment was recovered and returned, please be advised that further violations will result in a formal fine of up to $500 per occurrence, per HOA guidelines. For clarity, temporary abandonment of mobility equipment qualifies as obstruction under Clause 4.3. Sincerely, Nancy B. Assistant Secretary of Community Conduct. I was floored. They were fining us for being robbed? I stormed into the kitchen, showed Marcy, and she stared at the paper like it was covered in toxic waste. "She's trying to frame this like we broke the rules," Marcy whispered. I nodded. "I know, and if we don't fight it, it'll go on record." So we filed a formal appeal. I documented everything. Photos, a copy of the police report, a notarized statement from Officer Langley. I even printed the timestamp photos I took of Karen standing beside the wheelchair. We submitted it all to the HOA board with firm requests for a full investigation and cancellation of the violation notice. We thought that would be the end of it. It wasn't. 3 days later, we got a response. The board has reviewed your appeal and acknowledges that while the removal of the chair may have been ill-advised, the underlying violation, temporary obstruction of the community sidewalk, still stands. As such, the fine remains valid. I read the letter 3 times, then read it aloud to Marcy. She just shook her head. "They're covering for her," she said flatly. "They're protecting her." I corrected, "because she's on the board." Marcy leaned on the counter and let out a slow, controlled breath. "She's not just a Karen. She's a connected Karen." The next week was hell. We started noticing little things. HOA officers walking slowly past our house and taking photos of our trash bins. Our mailbox being flagged for non-standard paint, even though it had passed inspection a year ago. A new complaint that our front yard grass was uneven by more than 1 inch. And most disturbingly, Emily's school van was stopped by HOA security for verification of authorized transport. They asked the driver if she was dropping off a resident. He thought it was some kind of joke. The moment he told me, I filed a complaint. Not to the HOA. They were a dead end. I filed one with our city's ADA compliance office, then another with the state-level Disability Rights Commission. And I wasn't done. I started documenting everything. Every HOA letter, every photo, every confrontation. I installed a doorbell cam that covered the ramp and driveway. I began building a digital folder labeled ADA Violations, HOA Retaliation. I didn't know exactly what I'd do with it yet, but I knew it would come in handy. And then Karen crossed the final line. It happened the following Monday. I had just come back from the grocery store and noticed that our garage door was slightly ajar. Not fully open, just a few inches off the ground like someone had tried to lift it without a remote. Strange. I pulled into the driveway, checked the side door, locked, walked into the garage. And there, taped to the inside of the garage wall with painter's tape, was a bright orange HOA citation. Unsecured property, code 5.7 violation. Improper storage of mobility equipment, wheelchair, visible from street view. Final warning. It was absurd. The garage wasn't even open. And how the hell had they entered my garage to post this? I checked the security footage. My heart sank. There she was, Karen, at 1:13 p.m. that day, wearing gloves, using a crowbar. Yes, a crowbar, to pry the edge of the garage door, just enough to slide the citation in. She didn't break in fully. She didn't touch anything. But she tampered with our private property to fabricate another violation. I called the police immediately. This time, they sent 2 officers. One of them was a woman named Sergeant Reyes. She watched the footage, nodded grimly, and said, "That's attempted unlawful entry. You've got enough here to file criminal charges and a civil complaint," which is exactly what I planned to do. But before I made my move, I needed more leverage. That's when something incredible happened. A man named Joel knocked on our door that Friday evening. I didn't recognize him at first, but he introduced himself as a former HOA board member, one who had quietly resigned 6 months earlier. "I've been watching what's happening to your family," he said, "and it's disgusting." He handed me a flash drive, everything Karen's done, the board meeting notes, the flag communications, emails about removing visible equipment, and even a message where she refers to your daughter as a visual liability. I kept copies. I didn't know what to do until now. I stood there speechless. "I can't speak publicly," Joel said, "but I can help you take her down." The flash drive Joel handed me felt heavier than anything I'd carried in weeks. It wasn't just digital data. It was the key to pulling the curtain back on an HOA rotten to its core. And it wasn't just about Karen anymore. This was bigger. This was systemic. I waited until after Emily was asleep to open the files. Marcy sat next to me at the kitchen table, hands wrapped around a mug of tea, while I plugged into my laptop and started going through the folders. Joel had organized everything. There were HOA board meeting recordings, private email threads, PDF attachments with stamped HOA letterheads, every file more damning than the last. We found a PDF titled Visual Uniformity Standards, Internal Guidelines Not for Distribution. Inside was a line I'll never forget. Residents are encouraged to report any visual anomalies, such as personal medical equipment, mobility devices, or structural modifications that may detract from the aesthetic cohesion of the neighborhood. Anomalies. That's how they saw my daughter's chair. Another file. An email from Karen to the board read, "While I understand ADA regulations prevent direct action, we can apply pressure regarding where and how equipment is stored. Let's be proactive. It's about preserving our image." She attached a photo of my daughter, cropped from the waist down, sitting in her chair near our driveway, my fists clenched so tightly I left half-moon marks in my palms. Then came the kicker, a spreadsheet titled Ongoing Concerns, Non-Compliant Residents. It was essentially a hit list, and there we were listed as priority number 3 under a heading labeled Visibility/Non-Standard Medical Equipment. Next to our name, Karen had left a note. Ongoing obstruction issues. May need citation escalation. Consider surveillance. Surveillance. They weren't just watching us. They were documenting ways to harass us legally. Marcy stood up and walked away before I even finished reading. She didn't cry. She didn't yell. She just needed air. I copied every file from the flash drive onto 3 separate encrypted backups. One on a portable hard drive, one uploaded to cloud storage, and another sent directly to my lawyer friend, Sam. Because at this point, it was time to stop playing defense. It was time to fight back. Step 1 was to build a case, not just against Karen, but against the entire board. I compiled a legal complaint citing violations of the Americans with Disabilities Act, ADA, and Fair Housing Act, FHA. These weren't civil HOA disputes anymore. This was federal territory. I had the footage of Karen tampering with our garage. I had the HOA's retaliatory citations. I had proof that they were targeting Emily as a visual liability. And I had Joel's testimony. Though anonymous for now, that would blow their claims of impartiality out of the water. Sam helped me draft a formal ADA grievance to the Department of Housing and Urban Development, HUD, and the state's Human Rights Commission. We didn't just report the wheelchair theft. We reported pattern discrimination. We included copies of all citations filed against us since the incident, photographs of our infractions, the HOA letter claiming our child's wheelchair was an obstruction, audio and email evidence of HOA targeting families with visible medical equipment. And then I took it one step further. I created a burner email account and submitted everything, including redacted versions of the files Joel had given me, to 3 local journalists who covered civil rights and suburban policy. One replied within 24 hours. Her name was Denise Morales. She'd been covering local government corruption for nearly a decade. She asked to speak off the record first and invited me to meet her at a coffee shop near the courthouse. I brought a binder of printed evidence. I laid it all out on the table. She read. She asked questions. And the moment she saw the email calling my daughter a visual liability, her face went pale. "They're going to regret this," she said softly. I asked if she needed more time to verify everything. She shook her head. "Oh, I'll verify it. But I'm not sitting on this. It's going out Monday." By Sunday night, Denise texted me a preview of the headline. HOA War on Wheelchairs. Disabled child targeted by neighborhood board. I showed it to Marcy. We didn't smile. We didn't cheer. It wasn't victory yet, but it felt like the tide was turning. Meanwhile, Karen must have sensed something was shifting, because on Monday morning, an official community compliance check was scheduled for our property. 3 HOA members, including Karen, walked onto our lawn, clipboards in hand, examining our front flower beds like they were toxic spills. But this time they weren't alone, because when they showed up, they were greeted by 2 officers, Langley and Reyes, who stood on our porch, visibly watching. We'd requested a police presence for resident protection during suspected harassment. It was approved. The HOA members scowled but couldn't say anything. Karen, in particular, looked like she'd swallowed a lemon. She tried to approach the officers. "Excuse me, what's this about? This is a private inspection." Sergeant Reyes smiled. "Not if it involves trespassing or harassment. We're here to make sure that doesn't happen." Karen puffed up like a blowfish, muttered something under her breath, and stormed off the porch. The inspection ended quickly. No citation was issued, and that night, Denise published the article. The fallout was immediate. By Tuesday morning, the story had been picked up by a regional news affiliate. By Wednesday, it hit Reddit and went viral in the r/entitled people and r/HOA communities. The comments were a tidal wave of fury and empathy. She stole a disabled kid's wheelchair. That's not just HOA Karen. That's criminal. How are these HOA people real? Like actually human? Name and shame her. Blast this everywhere. The HOA released a statement the next day saying they were reviewing the situation internally, but it was too late. The city announced an investigation into abuse of regulatory power, and HUD emailed me directly to say our ADA complaint was being fast-tracked. I thought that was the height of it, until Thursday morning, when Joel called me with a shaky voice. "Derek," he said, "you're not going to believe this, but you need to see it yourself." He sent me a forwarded email thread between Karen and a private contractor. In it, she was trying to pay someone to build a false fence citation against our home, offering a backdated estimate to file with the HOA. She was planning to create false evidence. It was obstruction, fraud, a federal-level crime if tied to retaliation. Sam nearly dropped his coffee when I showed him. "We're not just filing complaints anymore," he said. "We're filing a lawsuit." That night, we sat down with Emily and explained everything as gently as we could. She asked if Karen would go to jail. I told her maybe not, but that Karen would definitely get in trouble. Emily thought about it for a second, then said, "I hope she learned something." Marcy smiled. "Me too, sweetheart." But me? I didn't want her to just learn. I wanted her to face consequences. And they were coming. Hard. I didn't expect the entire neighborhood to turn on her so fast. The morning after police took Karen away, our doorbell rang nonstop. Neighbors, some I'd barely spoken to in years, came over not to gossip, but to apologize. Some brought casseroles. Others brought information. A few even had cell phone footage from prior days, including one clip where Karen blatantly wheeled herself into our garage and tried to remove Evan's backup wheelchair while muttering, "He can walk. He's just lazy." That video alone made my stomach turn, but it ended up becoming crucial. I didn't post it, but someone else did. By noon, that clip and the dash cam footage of the moment Karen rolled away in my son's wheelchair were circulating in local Facebook groups. One neighbor posted it under the title, "HOA Karen steals disabled child's wheelchair. Is this who we want representing us?" I didn't ask them to do it. I didn't even know they had that footage. But the moment it hit the internet, things moved fast. Karen's name wasn't mentioned directly in the post, but the comments section quickly filled in the blanks. People began sharing their own encounters. Stories of her shaming someone's daughter for wearing a crop top at the community pool, threatening fines for loud wind chimes, even verbally harassing a teenager with autism for pacing on the sidewalk. None of those events had made it to the surface before. People had been too scared to speak. But now, the dam had broken. I didn't have to fight her alone anymore. And best of all, I didn't even have to file the lawsuit, because someone else did first. A woman named Celia, whose husband used a motorized scooter due to MS, contacted me through my wife. She told us that after seeing the footage of Karen stealing Evan's wheelchair, her husband broke down crying. He remembered how Karen had once mocked him at an HOA meeting, whispering to another board member that he probably faked the MS to avoid mowing his own lawn. That was the last straw. Celia was an attorney, not a flashy one, but a very effective one, and she was sick of the HOA's toxicity, especially when that toxicity turned criminal. So she offered to represent us, for free, not just for a civil case, for an ADA violation lawsuit. Karen, Celia explained during our first sit-down, not only stole mobility equipment, which is theft, but in doing so, she committed a willful act of discrimination against a child with federally protected disability. The fact that she then denied his need for it, that's evidence of intent. If we bring this to the state or federal level, you're not just looking at fines. You're looking at criminal charges. And if the HOA doesn't want to be named as co-defendants, they'll start talking real fast. I didn't realize how far this could go until that moment. Karen had always operated with the assumption that HOA rules place her above the law. But now, the law was the one knocking on her door. 2 days later, the formal civil suit was filed. 3 days after that, the news picked up the story. I'll never forget the local reporter standing outside the community clubhouse, microphone in hand, saying, "Local HOA president accused of stealing disabled boy's wheelchair. Residents demand full investigation." Karen was still out on bail, but her face had been plastered all over TV and social media. People recognized her at the grocery store. Kids pointed. Someone egged her Lexus. I don't condone that last part, but in a twisted way, it showed just how deeply the community had been hurt. Then came the HOA emergency meeting. I didn't even want to go, but Celia urged me to attend, not as a plaintiff, but as a resident. The meeting hall was packed. Not a single seat open. Karen was nowhere in sight, but the remaining board members sat stiffly at the front, trying to project some semblance of order. When the floor was open for public comment, the first speaker was a woman in her 70s named Joyce. She'd lived in the neighborhood for 30 years. She stepped up to the mic, leaned in, and said, calmly, "I've never spoken at one of these before, but I'm ashamed it took this long. That woman, Karen, has terrorized this neighborhood under guise of rules for years. What she did to that boy. I can't sleep at night thinking about it. If this board doesn't remove her permanently, we will vote you all out. Every last one of you." Thunderous applause. Joyce was followed by 10 more people. Some angry, others heartbroken. A dad teared up talking about how his son once refused to ride his bike for months after Karen accused him of damaging community property. A disabled veteran shared how Karen mocked his limp as drunken stumbling. It was like a reckoning. A full-blown confession booth for everyone Karen had ever hurt. Then came the vote. Unanimous. Karen was removed as HOA president, and her membership in the HOA itself was suspended pending the results of the civil case. But the best moment came after the vote, when one board member stood and announced, "We've also reached out to the local district attorney, who has officially opened a criminal investigation into this matter, including potential ADA violations and theft charges." The entire room gasped. People clapped. Some cried. Karen wasn't just removed. She was under full criminal scrutiny. Meanwhile, Evan had no idea of the legal firestorm swirling around him. He was too busy wheeling around in his new electric wheelchair, donated by a local nonprofit after they heard about the incident. It had bright green rims and a joystick controller. He loved it. I loved watching him love it. But Karen? She had to face the fallout in every imaginable way. Local media didn't let up. Multiple articles, interviews, and even an op-ed piece in the regional paper called for tighter regulation of HOA power, using Karen as a poster child of what could go wrong. Even her own family began to fracture. Her adult daughter, who lived in another state, apparently posted something cryptic on Facebook. When your own mother makes headlines for hurting a kid, maybe it's time to reevaluate everything. The court dates were set. The first was a civil ADA suit. Celia was locked in, and as the day approached, we weren't worried. Karen had no real defense. The video was damning. The witnesses were lined up, and the entire community was rooting against her. But before the trial began, something surprising happened. Karen offered a settlement, a big one. Her lawyer proposed a number, high 6 figures, enough to cover Evan's future medical needs, equipment, therapy, and even college. No public apology, though. We thought about it. Celia encouraged us to counter, so we did. Our terms were clear. Full public apology in writing. Personal in-person apology to Evan with supervision. Full reimbursement for stolen or damaged equipment. An entire HOA board must institute new disability accommodation training with yearly audits. Karen refused for about 12 hours. Then the HOA caved. Not only would they implement every term, they would officially bar Karen from ever holding any role again. Karen didn't show up to the signing. Her attorney handled everything. But her name would be forever tied to that policy change. Because we made sure of one final thing. The new disability accommodation rules? They were named Evan's Amendment. It had been nearly 4 weeks since the day everything came crashing down for Karen, and the peace that followed felt almost too still. Like the calm after a hurricane, where you're afraid to trust the silence. My family was finally able to breathe again. No more patrol cars at the curb. No more crying kids. No more passive-aggressive notes taped to our door pretending to be from concerned residents. Just silence. Except this time, it wasn't uncomfortable. It was healing. Derek's wheelchair had been returned, but we didn't keep it. As soon as the insurance finished processing Karen's damages, we put the money towards something better. A top-of-the-line power chair that could handle uneven terrain, had custom lumbar support, and even elevated Derek to eye level. When the chair arrived, he cried harder than I'd ever seen him cry before, except these tears weren't from frustration or pain. They were tears of joy. We all cried with him. That chair represented more than mobility. It meant freedom, dignity, It meant that for the first time, Derek didn't have to rely on someone else to push him over cracked sidewalks or uneven HOA grass. He could go outside, turn the key, and just go. And that, more than anything, drove the final nail in Karen's coffin. Not literally, of course. Though if you ask my wife how she felt about Karen now, you get something not far from that. But metaphorically, Karen was done. After her arrest, news of her actions spread like wildfire, and not just in our neighborhood. Someone from the local paper picked up the story. HOA board member arrested after stealing child's wheelchair. Then a bigger paper syndicated it. Then a local news crew showed up. I never gave interviews, but the footage of Karen, screaming in cuffs with her sunglasses falling off as she was dragged into a squad car, that played on every local channel for a solid week. The HOA tried to pretend they hadn't known anything, but the community wasn't buying it. At the next open meeting, attendance tripled. People who hadn't said a word in 5 years suddenly had binders full of grievances. They showed up with photos, videos, and even text screenshots showing how Karen had used her position to harass residents, especially families with kids. Turns out, we weren't the only ones she targeted. There were others. Parents whose autistic children had been told their toys on the porch were clutter, veterans who were fined for the American flags they flew, and a retired couple who got in a violation because their mobility ramp wasn't HOA approved. The dam had broken. The HOA board's president resigned 2 days after that meeting. By the end of the month, half the board had either stepped down or been forcibly voted out. New elections were held. And this time, people didn't just show up, they fought to be heard. My wife and I didn't run, but we backed a neighbor named Alicia, a mother of two and a fierce advocate for accessibility. She won in a landslide. Within a week, the HOA bylaws were changed. Language was added specifically protecting accessibility features, medical equipment, and exceptions for families with documented needs. Derek's new ramp was approved the same day. And as for Karen, well, legally speaking, her situation kept spiraling. She was charged with petty theft, destruction of property, and child endangerment. The prosecutor even added a count of hate crime-related enhancement due to her targeting a disabled child. Her lawyer tried to negotiate a plea, but by then, the DA was under media pressure to make an example. Karen pled no contest. She was sentenced to 60 days in county jail, 12 months of probation, and mandatory anger management. But the real punishment came after. She was sued by our insurance company, then by another family she targeted, and then by the HOA itself, because as it turned out, she'd illegally diverted community funds to cover her own citation fines and landscaping upgrades. That was fraud. They seized her assets. She lost a Mercedes first, then her savings, then the house. The day we saw the for sale sign go up on her perfectly manicured front lawn, we stood on the porch, me, my wife, and Derek, and just watched. No words, just quiet vindication. But the real irony? The new family who moved into Karen's old house had a daughter in a wheelchair, a little girl named Ellie. First day they arrived, she wheeled up our driveway with a big grin and said, "You must be Derek. I heard we're going to be best friends." They were, and still are. Now every weekend, they race each other down the block in their wheelchairs, Derek in his electric one, Ellie in a sleek custom sports chair. The other kids follow behind on bikes, scooters, or just running. The whole neighborhood changed. People started talking to each other again, helping, being decent. What started as a nightmare became a turning point for the whole street. One afternoon, while watching them play, my wife leaned over and said, "Can you believe all this started because of a woman who thought she was above the law?" I looked at her, then at Derek, now laughing as he spun in circles on his chair. "No," I said, "but I'm glad she did." Because in trying to take our child's freedom, Karen gave us something we never expected: justice, community, and hope. And in the end, for someone like her, that's the greatest punishment of all.